Well, good morning and happy Thanksgiving to you. And it's either Thanksgiving Day or it's the day before Thanksgiving, depending on when you're watching this. But either way, happy Thanksgiving. And I want to share with you a story this morning, which you probably don't know, a story that might inspire you this Thanksgiving. It's a story about a man named Squanto. Now, there are some things that you know about Thanksgiving. We all do, from having been brought up in the schools and so on. We know about the Pilgrims and the Native Americans, Squanto and others. We know about the harsh winter and corn and so on. And then there are things we think we know, but are popular myths. Maybe the most striking is those pictures that you see of the Puritans, the Pilgrims sitting down with the Native Americans with turkey on the table. No, they probably did not have turkey. They probably had venison on that first Thanksgiving, or fish and so on, but not turkey. Anyway, you probably know some things about Squanto. You know his name, but I bet you don't know his story. See, the history of Thanksgiving has become complicated in these last 10 years or so because there are revisionists who come and have concocted different histories and basically would suggest that there was a European invasion that caused the displacement of Native Americans, and it focuses on that. And certainly there was a lot of bloodshed in the clash of those two cultures, and there were a lot of atrocities on both sides. But in the end, the culture of the West, the Christian culture, came and took root in what we now know as New England, and gave birth to the greatest country in the world. But I want to share with you the story of Squanto because I bet that you've not heard it. Squanto, his real name actually was Tisquantum, and he was a brave in the Patuxet tribe in northern Massachusetts. And he learned the things that all braves learned back in those early days. He learned how to hunt. He learned how to hunt deer. He learned how to fish. He learned how to harvest eels out of the mud. And during those days, when he was about 19, he was captured by a man named Thomas Hunt, who came and with deceit made an agreement with the Indians whereby he took some of the best, youngest, most skilled braves and took them for his own pleasure and profit, and they became slaves for him and took them away from their land. And so Squanto was taken away by Thomas Hunt. Now, I had a professor who used to say to us that our disappointments are often God's appointments. And we see this to be true not only in the life of Squanto, but in the life of the Pilgrims, because half a world apart in England, William Bradford and Puritan separatists had escaped persecution in England to the land of Holland. And they began to take up life there, and even though persecution followed them there, and so they began plotting their own escape from Holland and from persecution. While Squanto came into the association with Catholic friars somewhere along the line serving Thomas Hunt, and the friars took him under their wing and they taught him English. He learned English and Spanish, and most importantly, he learned about Christ. He learned about the Bible and became a Christian. And the friars, learning that he wanted to go back to his tribe from where he had been taken by Thomas Hunt, they began to devise a plan for him. And either Squanto escaped or he was taken by the friars. At any rate, he ended up under the tutelage of a man named John Slaney, who also was a businessman in England. And so the friars put him together with John Slaney, and he escaped Thomas Hunt and ended up in England. And John Slaney saw the opportunity for himself as a businessman to have such a man as Squanto, who knew 2 languages and who knew the ways of the Native Americans. And he saw an opportunity to make trade deals and to use Squanto in that process. And so there was Squanto in England with John Slaney about ready to take a voyage back to the New World. And then there were the Puritans under the leadership of William Bradford. William Bradford pooled his money with other English investors, and they also were planning a voyage to the New World. But Squanto beat them, and he, with John Slaney, boarded his vessel and went to the New World. And John Slaney actually returned Squanto to the place where he'd grown up, to Massachusetts Bay Colony. And Squanto returned there to another tragedy. He learned that his entire tribe, the Patuxet tribe, had been killed by smallpox. And so Squanto joined another tribe, the Wampanoags, and took up with them and helped them and learned more from them. This was in 1619, 2 years before William Bradford took his voyage on the Mayflower. Now, you may know this, that William Bradford actually planned to go to Virginia. They set sail for Virginia, but because of the winds and the winter, they ended up considerably north, arriving in 1621 at the exact place where Squanto's tribe had been killed of smallpox. And on that voyage of the Mayflower, 5 passengers died on the voyage itself, during the voyage. 40 more died in that first winter. But you begin to see the amazing way that God brought together the Pilgrims with Squanto in the very same place. The Pilgrims arrived knowing very little about the New World on a very hard winter, and Squanto emerged, as we read in our histories, from the forest to help them. He taught them how to fish. He taught them how to hunt. He taught them things that they needed to know to survive. And in his account of Plymouth Plantation, William Bradford wrote that Squanto was a special instrument of God to help them during that first hard winter. And yes, there was a first Thanksgiving, and Squanto was the bridge that God used to bring them together with the Native Americans. There's more to that story, but that's the part of the story you may not know, that it was a Christian man whom God had led on a very circuitous route in his own life, and brought him together with believers from England, from Holland, and now into the New World. I want to suggest 3 lessons for your life that we draw from the life of Squanto. And the first is to be thankful for the hardest of times in your life. You may be going through one of the hardest times in your life, but know that God knows your life and what you're going through. And you can even be thankful before you know what God is doing, because God will use some of the hardest times in our lives to do the most amazing things in our lives. That's lesson number 1. Number 2, God uses the most unusual people. Squanto, a Native American who had gone through his own life journey with God's help and was used in God's plan for the Pilgrims. God uses some of the most unusual people. You may have your own plan and your own people, but God may put other people in your life and use them. And then finally, your life is part of a much bigger plan. Your life is part of God's plan, and your life will impact the lives of others that you may not even know. It's part of a much bigger plan. And those are three reasons why we're thankful at Thanksgiving, that God is who he is. We're thankful for his sovereignty, that he takes the Pilgrims and he takes the Native American named Squanto, brings him to faith, and then brings him miraculously together for a much bigger purpose. Hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. God bless it. Amen.